Mm. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community CPA's Thursday webinar. My name is Catherine, and I work at Community CPA. And Thursdays are kind of our special day because we always bring in a guest to speak on topics related to business. And so today we have Anthony Arrington, who is a managing partner for Top Rank, which is a human resources company. So thank you, Anthony, for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me. I appreciate it.
So Anthony is, as I said, the managing partner for it, for the company, but he is also a Cedar Rapids native and has worked in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for a while. So he's here to share with us about his experience and why diversity in hires is important. So Anthony, did you want to say anything
Yeah,
about yourself and introduce yourself as well?
sure. Thank you all for having me again, Anthony Arrington. My company's Top Rank. We are been in business almost 4 years. We're a professional and executive talent search and a diversity consulting firm. And so we are unapologetic about our desire to help companies expand the diversity of their employee base and their work culture, not just the bodies that they bring to the office or the plant, but the culture that they create around equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as really educating on why it's important. So I started my company about 4 years ago in Cedar Rapids and still building the plane as I fly it, so to speak, and enjoying the work that I do. I don't know how much time I've got. I can tell you a little background about why I started my company, if that
Yeah, we
helps.
definitely have time, so we
Yeah.
would love to hear.
I've been in this recruiting space. I kind of fell into it by accident as a career, from a recruiting side. But I've always had sort of this recruiting angle to my career throughout my adult life. And so that's what led me into the recruiting world. What really led me into this space, this diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and to really become a practitioner was really what I seen as a staffing professional. And I tell the story of probably what I like to call the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I worked at a company for almost 5 years, managing temporary staff. And about 80% of my business at the time was manufacturing. I was the business development manager as well. So I live in Iowa. I get it. I'm Black. I understand what it's like to be a minority in the state of Iowa. And I understand too how I have to live as Anthony Arrington. And I've done a lot of hiring and firing in my life as a leader. But this was probably one of the first times in my career that I was responsible for large masses of hires, because I was hiring a lot of temporaries. And I was doing a lot of community work at the time, trying to help our community become more economically viable for people of color and to have more opportunities for minorities and diverse employees. Just personally, I was just doing those things. So my personal passion for diversity and equity really began to clash with my work. Not I will say clash, but it's going well now. But it clashed where I was because I was in a position where I was really just driving numbers, right?
Right.
Driving numbers. We need to get this many staff members. We need this many temporary people. But when I walked in to meet all my clients, everywhere I went, there was nobody that looked like me, rarely ever in positions of leadership. The people who looked like me or who looked like Catherine were on the floor making $10 an hour in a manufacturing plant. Or the women in the positions in these organizations were in the office. They weren't supervisors. They weren't manufacturing plant managers or leaders on the manufacturing floor in the office. They were administrative more often than not.
Right.
So I'm visiting a client in Northern Iowa, a wire harness company. I've been, for months, been really trying to work with my organization to be more viable in the community, to work with more reentry citizens, to find ways to raise these people that we're bringing in as temporaries into viable full-time employees and become productive long-term citizens. So I was doing a lot of work along the side, but I went to visit a client of mine about a job. They needed about 12 people, about 12 temporary employees north of Cedar Rapids. Having a conversation with the middle-aged white leader, is a general manager of this company across the table. And I tell you his race because it's important to contextualize what happened. He said, I need about 12 people. We talked about pay, hours, all the stuff that we needed to know so that we could prepare to recruit for him. We're getting up and we're leaving the business. We shake hands. And he's like, Anthony, appreciate you coming. I think your company can help us. We'll talk on Monday. He goes, but I got to tell you, he goes, I can't have those Chicago guys coming to work for me. He goes, they come into this company and they work here for a couple of weeks and they sell their drugs in this city and then they leave. And I just don't want any people like that working for me. And I knew at that moment, that was one of the longest rides home I ever had, because I had to respond to that as a professional. And I knew what he was saying to me. It was code word for, you're a good black man. You got nice khakis on the day. You look nice. You can keep your people out of here. You can keep those black people away that are selling dope in this community, and they come all from Chicago, because that is the perception that has been driven in the area that I live. So as soon as he said it, it's everybody in this community knows exactly what that means. And that was very difficult for me to deal with as a black man, sitting and having to hear that. And these are people that make decisions on our livelihoods. These are individuals that every day come to work. They hire, they fire, they manage budgets, they manage resources, and they decide what the culture of an organization looks like. And I decided at that moment, I can't take this. I can't continue to not use my voice and find some way to put more people that look like Catherine or me or others in seats to make decisions, because unless we can equalize power, platform, and privilege, this is what happens in the workforce, and this is why we are in the disparities that we're in. This contributes to that, I should say.
Right.
And so that was one of those aha moments for me where I said, I have to do something different. I'm either going to get fired from my company, I'm going to quit, but something has to change, because I can't continue to just recruit people for companies like this. If he said that, I know there's 20 other people behind him who won't say it to me, but this is how they manage.
Right.
For no fault of their own, maybe sometimes. They only know what they know. They have only learned what they learn. How can I teach? And so that was the premise of my business with my other partners. And that was sort of the emphasis that said, I need to do something about it. I need to try something different.
Right. So as you're shifting and doing things differently, how is your approach in your company different, especially when you're dealing with the leadership, right? So
Sure.
you're not just focused on filling for the lower levels, correct? You're
right.
The
Right.
management.
Yes, thank you for asking. And that's actually what we do. And I don't say this in a negative way, but my company, the vertical of filling entry level positions, and a $10 or $12 an hour positions, which are important. It's just not something that we do. I network to organizations that do that, and just because I don't have the capacity to do that, I didn't design my organization for high volume. I felt that we needed to help companies hire and educate leaders, and I also knew, Catherine, that in the state of Iowa, as I thought about my own backyard, when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not just who you hire, it's the relationships you build with inside and outside of the walls of your company, not just your employees, but your community, your vendors, your supplier base. Who do you buy your paper from, your copy paper from?
Right.
Who do you, when you need vending machines, or when you've got facilities repairs and you have outside companies, an electrical company coming, who do you hire? Do you know that there's minority-owned companies that do that business? Do you connect with them? Because you're building an economy, right? So I'm working, my goal is not to just work with companies to teach them how to hire or help them hire people of color or females or LGBTQ or what have you. It's what is your culture like to keep it? And so we work with organizations to help hire executives and help hire leaders, but I'm also hired to do cultural assessments and do executive alignment. How do you get your executive leaders aligned to understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean? They are three separate things. They are three separate initiatives that must work together. But often we just lump them together and think they mean, I got to hire Black people. Right. Like black people own that word, or that women own that word. So my goal is to teach these leaders how to think differently, about what diversity means. And if they can think differently, they control the type of environment because they control the budgets, the hiring, and the firing. So how can we be better at that?
Right, right. So when you're thinking about culture, then how do you start to approach the conversation with leadership? Is it just different depending on the company and what they're trying to achieve, or
Yeah.
do you have a particular focus that you work on?
Yeah, good question. I mean, obviously, you know, I mean, that's full transparency, right? I have to, I'm in business to put food on my table too. It's what I do for a living. So I have a sales hat on. I have to go and talk to organizations about what's important to them.
Right.
But it's easy for me. It's easy for me to do that because I care about what I do, right? So my goal is to try to meet organizations where they're at when we start talking about diversity and equity. So I help organizations in a number of ways. They may come to me and decide that they would like to improve diversity in their company. And typically it means we want more women or we want more Black people. And I already know that that's an education point that I'm
Right.
going to have to work on with them when we talk about what those three terms mean and what the journey means. So I have, depending to your point, Catherine, depending on the organization's needs is how I may approach them. If most of the organizations, let's just face it, in the state of Iowa are primarily Caucasian. So that conversation about racial diversity is easy to have when organizations are contacting me. When I'm contacting organizations, I'm asking them, um, have you thought about diversity as you think about your hiring and your hiring and your recruiting strategies? As I know you're struggling with talent today. Have talked to me about your recruiting methods. And oftentimes here when organizations are looking to hire a project manager or a vice president, I ask them about their culture. I ask them, tell me what you've done so far to hire. Tell me your strategies thus far. And I hear typically, you know, you hear your traditional strategies. We post on Indeed, we post on our job board. You know, we may post on a couple this side or that side. Trade organizations, we'll send our advertisements out to. All of your standard things, and I think that's great. But one of the things I ask is, tell me what relationships you build in your community, and who are you having conversations with in your own backyard? What is your organization known in the Latino community? Um, Not just financial support, but sweat equity. Do you have relationships with people? Oftentimes, what organizations have done it with good intention is they feel that they can enhance their visibility when it comes to diversity by donating to a cause, right? Or support sponsoring an event, and that money matters, right? But when you show up as leaders, when you show up as leaders and you show up authentically and you can get to a point where you're willing to do that as a white male leader or as a white female leader who's in leading an organization that typically looks and sounds and lives like you, when you're willing to step out of your box and know that you have the opportunity to expand and becoming more culturally competent, boy, does your level of opportunity to recruit better go up and your relationships in your community goes up. The reputation of your organization increases because people understand that you're real. They believe that you're real. They believe in the authenticity. And ultimately that helps. This is important to understand. Recruiting is recruiting. And it's a challenge across the country. Like, I don't care what color you are. I don't care what sexual orientation you are. Hiring is just a challenge right now in general.
Right,
So
right.
why would you not want to expand your pool? And so we have to teach about mindset. So I talk a lot about mindset and the change in mindset because that impacts what you do. How you think impacts how you deliver. So I talk a lot about that. How can we change mindsets?
And
Does that
then,
help?
yes, for sure. And then when you're talking about shifting culture, how does it impact the company in terms of retention?
Yeah,
Or, I'm sure that like as leadership changes and shifts in terms of direction, then it affects
right.
the workers as well.
Yes, great question. I'm going to give you a really live example that happened to me in the past 24 hours. I'm working with a company right now. We're doing some diversity consulting work with education and training with them. And we're talking to them about their recruiting strategies and methods. And one of the things we did is an assessment, a cultural assessment of the organization, because it's important, I believe, before organizations start investing in recruiting and saying, oh my gosh, we need to recruit more women, or we need to be better at recruiting, and dumping all this money into recruiting when they haven't thought about their backyard to begin with. So it's easy to see that you need minorities, right? It's easy to see if you don't have women. You can visually see that, but what are your people thinking about that? You may see that, but what do your people think?
Right.
So I had a client that I did an assessment. We got the results back and we met with them the other day. A lot of the comments and there were quite a few comments that came back, qualitative comments that came back, because there was a question that we asked: what do you think this organization can do to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion? And there were a lot of people that said, I feel like all you're doing is trying to hire Black people now. I feel like if I'm a white male, that you're not even going to look to hire me.
Right.
So what good does it do a company to try to, and with all good intent, Catherine, right? Try to create a strategy to hire more people of color when you don't even you haven't even communicated to your body of employees why you're doing that, why it's important, that it's not at the exclusion of others. And what you've done is, because there's lack of cultural competence and communication and authenticity and transparency and process, you've created a situation that could be much worse. You succeeded by hiring a woman or a person of color, but you've got a disgruntled staff. Guess what's going to happen? This staff stays disgruntled. This Black person or this woman that you hired is gone because they can't take it. And so what we work with companies on is mindset at leadership level, and explaining both the business case and the moral case for why it's important to think about diversity. There are dollars and cents tied to your ability to diversify thinking, diversify the mindsets of people that are at the table creating and innovating. We are in a global society. We don't just work for we don't build widgets for our backyards anymore. There's a lot of small business, a lot of mom and pop shops, but they serve a diverse community. And as we think about those changes, we have to prepare. And so I talk a lot about that from a business perspective, depending on if I'm having a conversation with executives, because maybe all they care about is dollars and cents. I know that's not the end game, but if dollars and cents matters to them, because it does matter, you got to keep the doors open.
Right.
So this is an investment, but it's an investment with a return on it. But it's not a return of the number of widgets you can build. It's a return on behavior and mindset to bring people together, which increases innovation, which ultimately will increase your bottom line. Oh, and by the way, add value to your community.
Right. Right.
Right.
So you did talk a bit about the moral piece of it. Do you want to elaborate on that a little more?
Yes,
Or?
yes. So that's that business case, right? That moral case is very simple, and it's very simple but very complicated. And I always put a Nike stripe on: just do it. It's the right thing to do, right? What human being, what would it feel like if you were a human being that was constantly rejected, constantly told no, constantly not giving an opportunity to survive? How morally demoralizing would that feel to you? And so what I encourage organizations and leaders to understand as you go along this journey, trying to improve diversity, the moral case is you have to look in the mirror yourself first, and you have to self-reflect first. Does this matter to you? Because I don't care what you do, how much money you dump into your organization. If there's not a moral compass in your body that you can get up and look every day at yourself in the mirror and say, diversity and equity matters to me, and I'm part of that. Even if I'm white, we are diverse and equitable people. We are part of this. We work together. If you can't self-reflect, and that's not an overnight thing, by the way. This is an ongoing journey. But if you can't do that, this is a challenge, and it's going to be met with, more often than not, failure as a leader. So that moral case, that's that look in the mirror case, and understand that as a human being and as a society, we have a moral obligation to treat our neighbors as we want to be treated, and to treat our coworkers as we want to be treated, and understand our history as an organization, our history as a community, our history as a country, and how we can move forward. That's not easy to do when you are used to how you've been raised, or used to how you've learned, and used to how you've lived. Your lived experiences are different, and your perception is your reality. That's okay. How do you meet people? How do I meet you? Or how do people who don't look, sound, walk, talk like me meet you where you're at? If everybody has the goal of moving forward, I don't expect you to understand what diversity, equity, inclusion means tomorrow.
Right.
But there's a moral case that you have to understand it, because it will impact you personally at some point. Hard to do, not a
Yes.
constant journey, but that's the moral case, is the look in the mirror case, Catherine, and ask yourself how you would want to be treated.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anthony, are there certain industries that you work with at Top Rank? And then on the other side, who do you get to fill in positions?
Sure, thanks. So it's funny, when we started our company in the recruiting space, there's a lot of school of thought, and a lot of organizations function on verticals. Um, we only recruit for construction people. We only recruit for healthcare. We're going to be experts in healthcare recruiting, so that we can understand that industry. And as recruiters, we can take advantage of shared resources and shared candidates, because of a great vice president of the orthopedic department, director of orthopedics, isn't great in Texas. Maybe he's a great fit for this hospital in New York. So there's a lot of specialization, but for us, we believe in finding leaders, and we believe leaders can lead in any industry. Having said that, primarily because of my network and my professional network, we do a lot of things in the manufacturing space, in the financial services space. So credit unions, bankings, insurance companies. Those are probably our two biggest verticals in our business right now. But we do a lot of work in the education space. I'm working with K through 12 institutions on building diversity and helping recruit as well. So doing recruiting and consulting work. So manufacturing, financial services are probably our two biggest industries right now. And then education is probably right behind there. And then you sprinkle in some other, we do a lot of engineering and tech, IT, hire CPAs too.
Yes. Diversity is much needed in this. So do we, is it in Iowa or Cedar Rapids, or do you have a broader focus than that?
Yeah, good question. So we're nationwide.
Okay.
I'm actually in a network of recruiting firms, small recruiting firms around the country. So I have access actually to other jobs with companies that aren't even my direct clients. So I've got about 3,000 jobs around the country. In terms of our direct clients, most of my direct clients that are under contract with me with Top Rank are in the Midwest. I've got a client out east, but I have positions all over the country. So we're sitting in Cedar Rapids, but I hire all over the country. Just hired a candidate in California that started last week. We're working on a position in Durham, North Carolina, construction executive role there. Working on a position in Tampa, Florida. Got a couple positions here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that we're working on. So we're all over, and our goal is, I'll say, with the exception of healthcare, because it's really a specialized type of recruiting skill set that you need. We'll recruit for most industries. It's the position and the goal of the organization and the leadership that impacts who we partner with.
Right. Wonderful. Yep. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, Anthony, what is the best way that they can do that?
Sure. You can reach me at, I'll give you my number, 319. I can put it in the chat if you'd like, 533-2624. That's the easiest way to reach me. And my email is aarrington@topranktalentsolutions.com. I'll put both of these in the chat for you.
Thank you.
And my website as well, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about our organization and what we do. I'll get that in there as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thank you.
I love hearing about your background and where you started, and I think the work is wonderful. So I really appreciate you joining in, and we'll also reach out to you regarding hires that we need as well.
Yes, we'd love to help you out, and if there's a way that we can help, if you have any questions offline, I know sometimes folks are a little shy about questions. I get all that. I'm an open book. You can ask me anything you want. Just know that you're going to get a blunt answer, whatever it is.
Thank you, Anthony.
All
Thank you,
right. Take
everyone.
care. You all have a great day and a great weekend.
You too.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye.